Hello. This is a call to remind you about your vehicle's expiring warranty. Just kidding. It's actually me. Ugh. Can anyone hear me? Dang, this camera looks really good. Is there anyone here? Oh, Emoto's here. People are talking about Slinky, royalty-free music. Oh crap, I didn't turn the music off. Alright. I mean, as much as it sounds like you guys really enjoyed that music. Oh, here's Emoto too. She's actually in the same room. I could hear myself on her phone for a second. Just shout over it? No. I don't have enough energy to shout. Oh look, everyone told me they can hear me. Oh, that's good. This is the most audience participation at one time we get generally, which is really funny, where I'm just like, can everyone hear me? And like everyone just chimes in, yes. Good. Hello everybody. Who's here? Emoto's here. Kiwi Frenzy. PS3 man. They call me Doodad. Rebel Dog. What's up, dude? Eternal Grimmy's here. Hello. Brodnix is here. Jay Crane. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. This is not enough water. This was my first water. I actually am going to have another special guest today. Generally, Emoto's the special guest, and it's really fun when she's here, but I actually have another special guest that's in town. And he is the Coil man. Our intention is to bore you guys so much that you guys get a nice afternoon nap as we talk about coils.
Can y'all hear me? Check, check, one,
Oh yeah,
two.
you're blowing up the levels. Oh hey, is that for me?
I'm blowing up.
Or is that for you?
Hello, Bert, that's for you.
Oh, hey thanks. Now I've got 2 waters.
Check, check, check. Oh, it's not too bad.
Yeah, not so bad. I think that's the receiver that's a little goofy. Can everyone hear Emoto?
I have a lav mic that's on the way. Hey, okay, I'm here to show you guys my awesome shirt before I button up my Marco shirt.
Which one is that?
You
Oh,
see
the
this?
Pinball Palace. Oh, bitchin', look at that.
Palace.
Oh, that's super cool.
I found it here when I was just walking around the studio, and I was like, it has my name on it.
This
like,
is for
oh,
me.
Yeah.
The Pinball Palace in Brunswick, Georgia. It's on Interstate 95, just a couple dozen miles before you hit the Florida border going south. Never been, but I'm excited to go someday. I drove
it's
past.
shaped like a castle.
It is. It's an actual palace. I drove by.
They got the 60th anniversary James Bond.
Yeah, we know. I know of a couple going on location. The 2 I know that will be on location, one at the Pinball Palace and one at Ace Gogi in Van Nuys. And maybe West Hills.
On tilt, represent.
What's up, everybody?
Ooh. Hello, Daniel. And everybody. You cussed already, Kyle?
I said bitchin'. That's a descriptor. I guess it depends on where you grow up and learn to speak English. Hi, Daniel. Welcome. Happy New Year. Yeah. So we'll have our special guest eventually. So it's not actually all about coils. We're just gonna sit here and shoot the breeze for a minute before we actually do talk about coils.
Tell us about what are coils?
In Californian, bitchin' is perfectly fine. And Rebel Dog says bitchin' is so Cali. But you know how you can instantly spot someone who's not from California? Is when they call California Cali. There is no one from California that would ever refer to California as Cali.
What?
Yeah, no, that's totally true. Or no one would ever call San Francisco Frisco. That is just not something you do. That is what like people.
Call it the Bay Area.
You just call it the city.
The city? What?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we were somewhere in Northern California, we were like, hey, let's go to the city and like I'm gonna go to the city and see a show. You know exactly what that means. You're going to San Francisco to see music. Oakland has a moniker. They call it the town because it's just the crappy little town next to San Francisco that gets all the crap.
The town. The city and the town.
Yeah. Someone needs coil help. Someone wants to learn about coils.
Yes, see, they want to teach them, first off, teach them what a coil is.
Well, we will, but let's wait for Andrew.
Solenoid, yeah, he is the master.
Andrew's going to be the one that is more interested. The PS3 man, you probably don't have a problem with your coil, but I would check the mechanicals of that device. Look, it's like coils, and I think Andrew would back this up. He's probably going to agree, but like coils either work or they don't. So if your coil is doing something, it is most likely working. Now, there is definitely some fine text that goes along with that, but generally, if a coil is doing something, that is not the issue. So if you're talking about the like the trough that kicks it into the shooter lane, I mean, make sure that it's free of obstructions. Make sure that the coil's sitting tight. Make sure that the spring isn't broken or anything like that. Those things can cause weak ball launching performance, if you will. My VP cab, virtual pinball cab, runs off 12 volts. So I've been cheating with real pinball coils and can get some to trigger with 12 volts. Yeah, absolutely. You can get a lot of pinball coils to run on 12 volts. Most pinball games, even going back to like EMs, you'll have two different voltages sometimes. I think most Gottlieb games ran on about 24 volts all the way around, I think. But you'll have some games that would use a higher voltage to run certain coils, and the rest of the coils would run on like 24 volts. A lot of electromechanical games will run on 24 volts. But then you have like up into the 80s, like with Bally's flipper coils ran on 43 volts, and the rest of the coils would run on similar voltage. Wow, actually, you know what? I need to check schematics. I don't remember this stuff off the top of my head anymore. Williams would use 24 volts for coils and 50 volts for the flipper coils and stuff like that. And so there's generally a mix of voltages.
What about, can you help PS3 man? What do you think's wrong with his TMNT?
That's what we were talking about with the coil being loose and the upkicker thing.
So he says is there supposed to be a lot of player slack in the auto shooter mech? It seems all the screws are tight, but it gets weak after a few plays.
Well, there's a difference between like the screws being tight and the rest of the assembly being tight, right? So like if the coil is held into the assembly, but like the retainer is like a few millimeters above, or it's come loose and the coil can wiggle, that can rob power from your assembly. So those are things to check. A lot of the times that kind of stuff comes down to, can come down to also being like misaligned and misadjusted. What I would suggest to you is to use your cell phone, what's it called? Like the slow motion camera, the high FPS camera, and watch what the ball does. So a lot of the time, if the ball is coming out of that thing just perfectly and it's not rattling and shaking or anything like that, then there could be a problem with the coil. The other thing you could do is take it apart, right? Take it apart, make sure the coil sleeve is still good, make sure it's all nice and tidy. Yeah, Eternal Grimmy, we'll totally talk about that. Because right in front of me, I have some higher powered coils that we will put in my Baywatch. We always talk about not messing with things too much, and I don't like changing the prescribed values of certain things, but we will today. Again, like, look, this kind of stuff takes like milliseconds, right? But like, let's imagine like a coil. The power that a coil gives, the power of its electronic or the magnetic field can be measured or simplified as like the car is going to come in on one lug, and the faster it can get out to the other lug, the more powerful the magnetic field will be. So if we have a coil, a car is kind of a bad example because the wire gauge also makes a difference. Here, let's look at these, Emoto, since we're here. Look at this thing.
So pretty.
Do you see how thin that wire is? Maybe you should bring this to the camera. So bring that to the camera, and then bring this to the camera. And let's look at the difference in wire gauge first off. So take a look at these cameras a moto is going to show up. So the one without a wrapper, that's a flipper coil that has a power and a hold winding. That's the hold winding. It's very skinny.
Wow.
Right? It's a very thin wire. Now show the corner of that Lord of the Rings coil or that flipper coil, and look how fat that wire is. It's kind of hard to tell, I guess, but I mean, maybe it's better to use like an actual
handheld. Yeah, the little handheld. Can you see that?
Well, maybe, but you can see that the thickness of the wire matters. Let's use a car. Let's use water as an example. We're going to put a set amount of water, and we need to force that water through one of these lugs into another. So let's say that we're going to force our water through this very thin wire. This very thin wire happens to be wrapped around 1,000 times around this bobbin.
I'm going to focus on it.
What is going to happen is the mass of the water is going to need to compress. We'll call that resistance, right? It's going to need to, instead of being this wide, it needs to go really narrow to fit through these little wires. And it needs to run through those wires 1,000 times. It's wrapped around this until it can get to the other side. And then we will get our magnetic force, which will end up being pretty weak. If we look at this flipper coil, this Lord of the Ring, or this Stern style flipper coil, we've got a very thick wire that's not wrapped around the bobbin too many times. Let's say that it is this thicker wire can fit 2 waters, one next to each other, and it only has to go around this thing 400 times. So now we're going to fit 2 waters next to each other. It only has to travel around 400 times before it comes out the other side, thus creating a much more powerful magnetic field. And that's what we have when we have higher or lower power coils. If we have to force a lot of juice, water, through a really thin wire that's wrapped around a lot of times, we're going to have a weak magnetic field built versus this, which is going to be really strong. So that is why on this flipper coil, we have one power side, so a very thick, fat wire, not wrapped very many times, and then a very thin wire wrapped around a lot of times. So that is why we have one that will thwack, and then when the end of stroke switch opens, it combines all of them together, and this dissipates that heat a lot because we aren't trying to shove a constant amount of water through these fat wires. Does that make sense? It's a little crazy.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Why does that one have 2 diodes? Or yeah.
Well, because it's 2. So this is a dual wound flipper coil. So this would be one that would be used on like your hard body, for instance, where we have our one voltage being presented, one path to ground, but the end of stroke switch bridges both. So it's to remember, because diodes are there to keep when a magnetic field collapses, it will cause reverse voltage. So the diodes are there to kind of be like a gate. Once that water starts to come through and when it turns off, that gate comes up immediately. It won't let any water come back out the other side.
So it doesn't explode?
Yeah, because that'll destroy electronics otherwise. Does that make sense though?
Yeah.
And that's why, so Stern, the way Stern does it is, or Data East or Sega, all of these, they used one coil and they used a fancy computer to modulate the power. But so it would just apply power every X milliseconds, which would keep it from warming up. Williams still used a dual wound coil up until the end. It's 2 different ways to kind of do the same thing. But does that make sense? I don't even remember who asked the question, but we were talking about removing windings. Okay, so Eternal Grimmy, does that make sense? So if we took this coil, this thick wired coil, and we wanted it to be a little more powerful, we could remove 100 windings and it would be even more powerful, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's basically what this is. Andrew, who will be here eventually, has a Lord of the Rings, and he found that putting just a little bit of a hot-rodded coil into the game made the game more pleasurable. You've heard of flipper fade before, right? Mm-hmm. So when these things get hot, because they're getting used all the time, they do swell. he found that using a bit of a more powerful coil, even when these things start to fade a little bit, it will push through that better and not affect the performance. So you'll notice these things on games that have like really long shots or tall ramps, kind of like Lord of the Rings. If the flippers start to fade a little bit, the game's just not as fun to play. And Baywatch kind of suffers from that. Baywatch has a super tall ramp.
So do you just let the coils cool down and then it works again?
Mm-hmm. When you're not using them, they cool, right? But there are some people out there that do some, crazy modifications. Like there's a guy that makes these like brackets that point fans at the flipper coils to like keep them cool and stuff, which is pretty neat. And that's like for the really picky player, like tournament players would love that kind of stuff. But most of you guys at home, it's a neat thing, but you wouldn't need that like for just to enjoy the game. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, but Baywatch, let's look at it, Emoto. And we can let's show the peoples also. Do you want to bring the big camera?
Yeah, I'll bring the big camera. Let me see.
So let's look at this, because Andrew was like, let's install the same coil on both sides. And when we looked in the manual, we found that Baywatch, I think Baywatch actually uses 3 different flipper coils, like 3 different strengths. So let's look at the layout of Baywatch here really quick, and we can see that some of the longest shots are off of the right flipper. We've got this really long orbit shot. We've got a ramp set back really far back here. And not only that, we also have an extremely tall ramp. So the right flipper has a very strong coil. Actually, I mean, shucks, the game's on and open and safe. Let's take a look. Let's read these numbers. Now, Stern names their coils weird. Sometimes they don't label them with their actual numbers, but the right flipper coil is so all Stern part numbers that start with 090. That's the prefix for a coil. So the right flipper is an 090 5020. And then the last part numbers are 30. I don't exactly remember what 30 means, but it's not important. But the middle number kind of tells us what it is. It's a 5020. Let's look at the left flipper. There's charts online that'll tell us exactly how many windings and all that stuff is too. But let's look at the left flipper now. This ramp, while long, is rather close to the flippers, and it's not very steep. What other shots does this flipper make? We've got a little teeny spinner orbit shot. We've got a longer orbit shot that is kind of technically a shot, but hard to make. And we kind of can hit these drop targets. We can kind of shoot for the top here for the up kicker, but that's not really anything that needs to increase in elevation. So that flipper coil is a 090 5030. I'm pretty sure the way the nomenclature works is like the higher the numbers, the weaker the coils are. But then we've also got these side shots. The shark flipper is the weakest coil in the game. The shark flipper's only real job is to either send the ball right out the left out lane, because this is what the game is doing to you when it does that, or you're trying to hit these shark targets or get it into this hole. It only has to travel, 18 inches maybe across the playfield. It doesn't need a strong flipper to do that. The upper left flipper, on the other hand, it does have a bit of a steep ramp to go up, but again, the travel distance is really small. So this has a equally weak flipper, or equally weak coil. This is a long-winded way of saying that some games the designers will tune the coils to work with how the game is set up. Andrew says and thinks we should try using the same coil in the bottom. It'll be a bit stronger. This is kind of splitting hairs, but let's try it. I do know that this game definitely suffers from flipper fade on the right flipper, because this is a super important shot.
Oh yeah, that's steep.
Yeah, isn't that crazy how steep it is? Like if you get down here and look,
far away and steep.
Yeah, it takes up like every available bit of space with only a few inches, like
millimeters for this.
It's pretty nuts. So we're going to try the same flipper coil. Now I know that I've said this like 10 million times on this show that like I don't change this kind of stuff. Like just put in exactly how it is, put it together, rebuild it right, and it will be fine, which is true in 90% of like examples that we would ever talk about. But in some cases, like when you have done all that and it's still not perfect, well, you can give it a shot.
I found a spot.
Actually, I was thinking
right
about
here.
yeah, I was thinking about either putting it there or hiding it on top of the top of this or
No,
something.
I like it there. You're...
But then you can't see the light.
No, if you go...
Oh, down there. I'm afraid that the ball might come up and but whatever. It's not to the game.
Oh, yeah, that would be bad.
I'm going to read the chat now. I just want to see if that made sense because we were kind of...
Yeah, so Dylan was asking a question that you kind of covered a second ago, but said, do you find that you get diminished returns when removing wire? I imagine coil power is dependent on both current and number of reps. I'm curious where that crossover point is for max power.
Well, I don't know. Let's talk to Andrew about that because he's actually the expert. But I would assume with my lack of knowledge, but like a grasp, yes. But also at the same time, removing 20 to 50 windings is a drastic, insane difference in the power of a solenoid. So. And
Call Me Doodad said, do the coils lose power over time?
No, coils don't lose power over time. It's the side effects that. Excuse me. It's the side effects of coils being used that will reduce the power. It's not necessarily the coil 100% of the time losing its like strength, but what it is overheating coils and the bobbins start to swell, which then pinches the plungers on the inside, which won't allow them to move through the assembly when the magnetic field is created, right? So you'll get a lot of resistance, thus making it like weaker. Now that being said, when you do start to have a coil fail due to heat, so let's say you didn't adjust your end of stroke switch on your mechanical flipper, your mechanical end of stroke switch style flipper, right? And the coil starts to melt ever so slightly. Like we're not talking like totally melting, like mess, burning, on fire kind of crap. We're talking about it getting hot enough. Actually, Emoto, can you put on the handheld camera? Let's just sacrifice this coil here. This is like I've got this giant box of coils that the company was going to throw away because they were like either stored wrong and broken or they were unsellable, unnecessary like replacements sort of thing. Oh yeah, I hate bottled water, sorry. But I need water and the water here tastes like garbage, so I have to drink bottled water.
You just moved it to get it back in the shot.
Oh. So when things start to overheat, right? I think this is a coil from a crane game or something. But when the coil starts to overheat ever so slightly, these are wires, right? But you'd think it's like, oh wait, well what if you put all these wires together? Isn't that a dead short? No, because these wires are coated in a very thin lacquer. So if I take my flush cutters here and I kind of scrape at this, we will slowly remove the red lacquer and be left with copper. It's not really coming off because this lacquer is really good. Whatever, that's what happens. So this coil starts to overheat because the end of stroke switch isn't done right. This lacquer starts to melt. When that lacquer starts to melt, these wires suddenly start to touch each other. Right? This is one continuous strand of wire. When that wire starts to touch each other, you're starting to get big giant shorts. So now the electricity or water in our example there doesn't need to travel that entire 600 wraps around. It found a convenient shortcut. After going through 50 times, it just skipped 300 windings and now it can go through. Now you've got a bunch of dead shorts. Since there is a lot less resistance, it is creating a lot more heat, which then melts more wires, which then pulls more current, which then explodes your fuses or causes the flippers to melt. So yes, flippers can wear out over time, but generally, if everything else controlling them, etc., doesn't have an issue, the coil will not have an issue. And that's why I generally will err on the side of giving the advice of coils are good until they're not.
That's right.
I mean, like, you think about it, like,
Hold on one sec.
I mean, like, here, like, for example, right? Like that 2001 we were working on last week, that has coils in it from the 70s, right? That has the coils that the game was built with in it. See, Mike?
All right,
if
I
you
just
unmute
got the
it.
Yeti
Okay.
on.
I guess we lost sound there for a second.
Well, the A7S3 was just it froze,
Oh, really?
but it should be back now. Tom? No. Check.
Well, here's what I would recommend. Yank the unplug the capture card from the computer, and then plug it back in.
Is that what you did last time?
Give it a shot, and if that doesn't work, I don't know, because I had the same issue with the sound when the Sony camera took a dump before. Yeah, we had to turn on our emergency microphone. Okay, so plug it back in. Yeah, we've got a microphone now that's like 6 feet away instead of like on my neck.
Oh yeah, it's good.
All
Alright. We back.
It does need to be pretty hot. Yeah, it really does need to be pretty hot. But it doesn't take much sometimes, and especially on coils like a flipper coil, which is a really low resistance coil. These coils are again, the way that they're modulated, right? The computer controls the power. It gets a full 50 volts of oomph, and then every couple milliseconds, it is being pulsed with just a teeny amount of power to hold the flipper up. But it's a very low resistance coil. There's coils such as, let's look at, we'll probably go over most of this again when Andrew comes back, just for giggles, but because he probably knows a bit more than I do. Well, I mean, I definitely know he knows more than I do. So here's like a relay coil, right? This could be for something like the lock relay on your electromechanical pinball machine. This coil is an M bobbin, which is the shape and form factor of the coil. It has 31 gauge wire wrapped around the core 1,500 times. So this coil here, what I can just kind of quickly discern from this is a very extremely high resistance coil. This is designed to be actuated for long periods of time without doing a bunch of damage while being actuated.
Oh shit.
So here is
I gotta go. I'll be back.
Okay. Emoto's going to take off for a bit, so hopefully we'll get Andrew sometime soon.
He's bringing an Amazon box. It has our new lavalier that hooks up to that.
To what?
Just open
This?
it. Yeah, like the lav mic.
Oh, it has a new mic. Okay, got it.
All right, I'll be right back.
So this is obviously a different form factor, right? This is not a relay coil. This is a 23800. This is one of the most common coils in pinball for maybe like a more intense application, like a kickback or something that needs a bit of oomph. You'll see a lot of 23800s and 261200s. But this, actually, it has the resistance printed right on it. This is 3.6 ohms of resistance. This uses a 23 gauge wire, which is much thicker, right? The lower the number, the fatter the wire, where the higher the number is the skinnier wire. And it's only wrapped around this bobbin 800 times. You can see the corners broken, so you can kind of see how they wrap around and are stacked on top of each other, right? So if this thing started to overheat and melt, and suddenly, you know, these bits of wire here were all melted together in one solid piece of copper, right? Our resistance would go from 3 down to like 1, which would allow a ton more current to pass through, which would then hopefully blow our fuse. So does that make sense? Are these kind of nice? Yeah, the pin coil is our own brand here at Marco, actually. And a lot of the coils that we have manufactured for us will get this wrapper. If we don't have a file for it, sometimes we don't, but yeah, it is kind of nice. It'll tell you everything you need to know. Actually, hold on. Let me go grab my toolbox. Let's do a little bit of resistance measuring, and we can kind of put a number to this, right? Give me a second. I actually have an oddity in the back of my car that I would kind of like to show, but I can probably just describe it. But one of my friends sent me I think I might have talked about this before. One of my friends sent me a 5-bank drop target from Swords of Fury. There's only 2 games that use a 5-bank drop target. Bad Cats and Swords of Fury, but I'd really like to try and put those drop targets in my roller games for giggles. Okay, so we're going to power up our voltmeter here. I guess I won't put it in diode mode because we can get a more exact resistance reading, but let's read the resistance on this 23800. So we've got about 4.3 ohms. The label says about 3.6. That's actually kind of a big difference there. I wonder if we have another one to measure. That is within like a margin of error, I guess, but that seems like a big margin. Now we'll find another one later. But let's see. Oh, wait, hey, look at this. Here's a stern coil. So we were talking about that, the 090-5030. This is a 5.1 ohm coil. And then is there a 5020 in here? There is. A 5020 is about a 3.8 ohm coil. Kind of interesting, right? So it's significantly less resistance. 1 ohm can make a big difference, and that is why like the right flipper on this thing is a lot more powerful than the left. Let's quickly measure this crazy coil here, 31-1500. That's 35.8 ohms. That you can leave on for quite a long time without a crazy amount of heat melting things. Pinball Magician, Simpsons had a 5-bank drop. Yes, let me preface that, or re-preface that. The only Williams game, there's 3 Williams games that used a 5-bank drop target in that era. Bad Cats, Swords of Fury, and Judge Dredd. But Judge Dredd's drop target bank is different than the older version. So that is why we are going to, or that's why I need one of those 2 from very rare games. So let's take this 090-5020. Let's measure the resistance on this coil. It's telling me about 4.5 ohms, which is a little off from this. I also don't have I'd like to get a resistor that we know the resistance of and measure it to see if my voltmeter is accurate. Let's measure this upgraded coil. 3.6. What was this again? 4.5. Yes. So this is significantly stronger than even this coil. It's a special blend. Andrew won't even tell me how many wraps it has. But yeah, I don't know. Coil talk. Does that make sense? Are we kind of like on track here, or? Yes, you can simplify it that way for certain. The lower the resistance, the more punch it will have, right? The resistance is like, this is not, look, if we just go back to that silly analogy I gave about the, water fitting through skinny fat wires and how many times it needs to run through those wires, etc. The resistance could maybe be construed as time, right? The amount of time it takes to get from one end to the other. So if it takes less time to get from one end to the other, we have a much more powerful magnetic field, a more Smack. Yes, there we go. There's the actual equation there. Voltage equals current times resistance. Is that it? I don't know. I can't read. Sorry. But generally, as a rule of thumb, yes. Less resistance, more power. More power can be detrimental. If we have a dead short or 0 ohms or 1 ohm of resistance, that could be causing way too much of a current inrush, thus blowing a fuse. So that is another reason why fuses are so important, especially on drive circuitry, like for coils and such. The circuits are designed to be able to have a ceiling for the amount of current that theoretically should be put through them at any given usage scenario. And it is fused accordingly. The game is doing its job when it blows the fuse if one of these coils ends up being a dead short or something like that, right? So it's a little complicated, but not too complicated to try and at least wrap your mind around what they do. So, still waiting for the expert. I don't want to get into this too much. We learned Ohm's law as Vermont over Rhode Island. That's funny. There's always a good, what is that called? It's like it's not an analogy, but like anagram? Is it an anagram? I don't know. Those are funny ways to remember things. But yeah, and that's also why there's so many different kinds of coils, right? Different coils need to be tuned for their application. So when we look at like a Gottlieb game or something like that, every relay could use a different coil because of how they function, right? Like a lock relay needs to be on all the time. That's what keeps the lights on. That's what tells the game to keep going. When the tilt relay activates, the plumb bob hits the side, the tilt relay goes on, cuts all the power, the lock relay comes out, all the lights go off, game over. That needs to be on the entire time the game is on and being played. Now, those things do get really toasty. After a long time, they will get really toasty and look like they're bad. But that's a very high resistance coil. It doesn't create tons of heat while it's actuated. Some things need to come on quickly, so you'll have a very powerful, a lower resistance relay coil to actuate that switch stack and then let it go, depending on how the circuit needs to work. So the dead short is the current jumping from point A to point B and skipping everything in between. Yeah, I mean, in the sense of a shorted coil or something like that, exactly. That is what we would refer to it as. Also, again, there needs to be, I think, there needs to be some sort of resistance, right, to create that magnetic field as the electricity goes from point A to point B through all of those wires. It creates that magnetic field, thus moving that Ferris plunger or doing whatever we need for that magical pinball experience. But yeah, a dead short would cause all of that to be skipped. The current inrush would be really high, and it would blow your fuse. How does all this translate to force? Any of the specs relate information in this way? I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing. But again, let's think about it this way. The less resistance, right, in a coil, the stronger it will function. I've always wanted to do this, but build like a test rig, right? If we had like a little, like a rig with like a 5-degree incline, and we had marks on it, and we have just a kicker, and we install a 23800. Let's measure how far the ball will go. And then let's step in another coil, like one that's a bit weaker, a 261200 or something, and let's see how far that will go. The coils are tuned in two ways, not only like the wraps, but also the wire gauge. And it's not a linear scale. I mean, of course, like a 231200 would be more powerful than a 261200. That coil doesn't exist, but a 231200 would be more powerful than that one just because the wire gauge is fatter. It allows more current to pass through those wires as opposed to the 26 gauge, which is skinnier, thus creating more resistance. So the more resistance of a skinnier wire combined with the fact that it also has a long path to travel makes a difference. I think there's a guy in Texas, the Pinball Medic. He's got an incredible table of data of like all sorts of coils showing like their resistance, their windings, etc. It's interesting. It'd be fun to do, but I think I don't know. I like building things, but there are things that are just kind of like innately semi-understood, and I don't know. There's a 23800. Let's find some weird ones. Here's a Capcom coil. This is sad. I hate seeing these things broken this way when they're not stored right, but here's a Capcom coil, a CL00109, which is a 23800, which is the same as this coil here. That is why on our website a lot of the time, if you look for certain coils, it might just tell you to buy a 23800. Because if it is a 23800 and it shares the same bobbin, these are absolutely interchangeable. These are the same part. I keep a lot of these because like theoretically I could use this, right? Even with the bobbin being broken like this, like if I needed it one day, like this could be used. On a personal game, I wouldn't use it in a customer's game, but something like this is an extreme example, but I have a couple of these coils where literally just like the corner is broken off a teeny bit. It's still kind of usable, right? I'd use that in a game, one of my games. I'm also a hoarder, so don't take any of this to heart. I have a problem. Here's a 110 volt coil. Look at this monster. It's a 221150. This runs on 115 volts, and these are generally used to like reset gigantic trip banks in Williams games. Here's a standard, again, here's a Stern flipper coil. It's almost the same bobbin, but look how thick that thing is. It's a monster. Yes. Yeah, I'm not a physicist. I'm just an idiot that knows how to wrench on pinball machines. But I'm trying to give a extremely layman's understanding on how some of this stuff works. So hopefully you guys can apply it when you are troubleshooting games. I really like these old Gottlieb coils. This is a very like 1950s style Gottlieb coil, but these ones that have these cardboard bobbins, these are very common on old wood rails. We have a part number stamped into the cardboard here at the base. It's a A5143. I think this is a very common style coil. This will eventually be made more modern with a nylon bobbin, but back in the day, that is how these things were made. You gotta remember, I mean, like, solenoids like this were used in many, 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 many things. I mean, every single vending machine ever has solenoids like this. Lots of, industrial machines use solenoids like this. Certain manufacturers that had more money, right, were able to fine-tune and order these things the way they need to. I love Gottlieb coils, though. And this is, I guess this is a frustrating and difficult thing with Gottlieb, too, is Gottlieb had their own naming system, right? I mean, kind of like Stern does, but at least Stern writes or Data East, Sega, that whole enterprise, right? When I'm talking about Stern, I'm not just talking about modern Stern. I'm talking about 1985 Data East until now. With their numbering system, like 090 Coil, 5020-whatever, we kind of can understand, right? The 5020 is strong, the 5030 is weaker, the 5040 is weaker, the 5050 is weaker than that, going up. But Gottlieb, they used just a bizarre nomenclature. An A9741. I don't know what this coil is. Steve Young and Gordon Hasse, way back in the day, deciphered it, right? There was one big company in Chicago, I'll have to ask Andrew once he gets here, but I think was called Electrical Windings, and they made almost all the solenoids for every single coin-op amusement game from the 30s until today. And I believe, and there's also a few other places. There was another company called Santucci Enterprises that made a lot of coils for Williams back in the day also, and Bally. And that's the interesting thing to really think about is jukeboxes, other coin-operated arcade games, pinball games, all of this stuff was manufactured in Chicago. And there's this really amazing bit of industry that surrounded this manufacturing, this industry, right? You had the companies that would make the playfields, the companies that would just make artwork and glasses and plastics, companies that would make these solenoids, because all of that stuff was based in one town. But generally these manufacturers would be semi-loyal to one company way back in the day. Then when things got super crazy in the 80s and 90s, I mean, I know Williams had like at least 3 different manufacturers for playfields, multiple manufacturers for cabinets, everything, right? Let's see if we can find like a bigger Gottlieb coil. I know that there was a larger bobbin, like flipper coil in here somewhere. Here's another interesting cardboard bobbin coil. Looks like it's a 26800, but I don't know what that prefix is. Some of these I will keep just for, I don't know, just like curios and interesting little bits of wall art one day. I also love something else. I don't know if this will focus, but I love how Gottlieb put their name on everything. Since Emoto's not here, we can't focus. But you see around the top of the bobbin there, it says Gottlieb. It's just incredible how they just put their name everywhere. I love it. Let's see if I can find one. By the time Andrew gets here, we're not even going to need him. Look at this one. It's so cute. Who the hell knows what this is for? Probably not even pinball, but... Well, here's a larger Gottlieb coil. Here's another one. The Gottlieb flipper coil from the 80s. Peel this sticker off. But again, so this is a flipper coil. You know, again, the only information you're given is A17875. You can't decipher that. You know, at least when you look at if you look at a Williams flipper coil. Let's find a... well, Williams did the same thing too, actually. So they're extremely guilty. Sorry, I was going to mean, let's look at a Bally coil. But here's a Williams flipper coil. This is from... this is a phony one. This looks like it could be one from like... we have all these ones that have our like sample do not inventory. I'm just peeling the wrapper up on that one. Let me find another one. Williams named their flipper coils with a strange nomenclature too. FL... prefixes. Where is one? Wow, there's really not a lot of Williams coils in here, is there? Or flipper coils, at least. Here's one. Here's an FL1 11629. So a lot of people might think, like when they think about their Williams games, they think about, oh, well, I've got a red wrapper or an orange wrapper or something like that. That is how you tell the power, but it's kind of weird and doesn't make sense. There is a chart on PinWiki that I have to refer to every once in a while just to remember what the most powerful coil is. I believe this is the most powerful coil that Williams ever made, the FL 11629. This was used on, I think one of the only games I can think of that it was used in from the factory was Star Trek Next Generation. But they were able to, again, have like Stern, have a range of coils that you were able to choose from to fit the application. Strong, weak. But yeah, so you have these numbers that kind of don't make any sense, which is a little frustrating for us. But then we have other companies that, like Gottlieb, A5114, A175, whatever it is. I guess at least for Williams, like other coils, we would have simple things like this. Well, let's also talk about this. Like, let's pretend that this coil was. Let's pretend that this coil was not a. Let's pretend that it was a 26 1200, not a 26 1500. But let's look at some of this information. I know some of this. A is the bobbin side. This is, hey, a Raider. Orbiter Guitars. Hey, thank you for rating our weird pinball tech chat channel. Hello, raiders. Welcome. We are talking about pinball coils and electromagnetism and stuff today. This channel, we kind of go over like the basics of pinball repair and such. And today we're talking about the ever so exciting electromagnetic wonders that make pinball machines work. Oh, excellent. Cool. Trizone's a great game. Weird Williams game. Well, welcome. We're not working on much today, but we're talking about the guts. I'm also starting to get kind of toasty, so I'm going to take off my jacket here. Oh, crap. Did I? Oh, I put this under my shirt. Perfect. Okay. So I look kind of professional. So we've got an A-size bobbin. Here's an AE 23800-04, and this is actually a good thing to pair next to it. I don't remember E, I don't remember L, but there's a few things that I can do, and we can, people will be like, well, what, sometimes people will call in and be like, well, my coil says it's an AE 23800-04, and you're telling me just to buy the 23800 with no modifiers on it. Well, remember, Williams was a manufacturing company, so there might be devices where certain things need to happen in a certain way. Let me try to find more examples in here. Let's say that we have a device inside of our pinball machine that we are manufacturing, and a good amount of the coil is not serviceable. We can't see a lot of the coil. So we're going to want to use a coil that may have things positioned one way or another. So the AL, this one makes sense. AL, I think a lot of the time this secondary letter after the bobbin size dictates where the lugs might be. So on this coil, I believe maybe the way that they named it was AL because the lugs are on the left. Hello, thank you for rating our channel. Welcome. Johnny Demonic will figure that out. That guy B. Smith. What's up, dude? No, I have not moved Deadpool yet. I might do it this weekend, though. I'm going to clean up Deadpool and bring it home and enjoy it. So maybe our device requires, for installation or on the line or for servicing, it's a lot easier to have our lugs on the left. So we have a special coil that is a left side lug. And then maybe the AL 261500 part number without this -01 could be this coil with a diode on the top. The -01 could be with the diode installed on the bottom. Well, what about these, right? Well, here's an AE 23800-04. Well, the difference between these two coils that if we look at these differently, right? Well, this one doesn't have a diode. But if you ordered a 23800, I believe our coils do come with a diode. They're just not installed because maybe the way it's installed in the game or the way it's accessed, it's a lot easier to put that diode on the bottom. They use a specifically manufactured part for a specific part of the manufacturing process. Nowadays, when you come to our store, it would be insane of us to have every single diode facing left, diode facing right, diode on the bottom facing left, diode on the bottom facing right. It's a lot easier for us to sell you this one, and then you put the diode on exactly how you need it. The diode direction only matters depending on the orientation of the wires. Maybe in the assembly that they were building with this bottom diode facing left, the harness was designed with a passover wire and the voltage needed to go on this side. And again, it's all about manufacturing. So I find that kind of interesting. But it's not super important. The most important thing for you to do if you were replacing this coil would be to order the correct gauge, windings, form factor, and then you can do whatever you'd like with the diode. Now, on this kind of a case, you might not be able to actually fit those lugs on, you might not be able to fit a standard coil in this mechanism depending on where it's placed, and that's why it requires the left side lugs. Coil names are easy once you kind of start seeing a few of them, and thinking about them. A lot of the times it's the prefixes that can make them kind of difficult. Here's a older Williams flipper coil. Oh, this isn't a flipper coil at all, is it? No, I'm wrong. Some of these older coils would be separated between DC or specific coils like for DC, which would generally have obviously have a diode installed, but we have an SA3. Well, what's that mean? I don't know. Well, maybe A. Okay, we've got an A bobbin, so it looks like it's about an A bobbin. A 23900 DC. Okay, well maybe back in the day, you know, the DC coil had a diode installed on it. SA. Well, I don't know what S is, but A. That's probably an A bobbin. Let's grab an A bobbin coil here. Yep, absolutely, the same size. Maybe 3. 3 might dictate what coil sleeve the coil comes with. Again, because you know we ordered these from Electrical Windings. They would come with this coil sleeve installed. So again, ease of manufacturing. When I'm the dude that's sitting there building the drop target assemblies at the Williams factory, you know, it's a lot easier for me to take this coil out of the box with the coil sleeve, the correct coil sleeve already installed in the right orientation, slip it in, screw it together, next drop target assembly. So a lot of the part number really can be fluff. If we needed a new one of these, we could order a 23900, and then we would have to potentially get the correct coil sleeve. This one is a little long. That tells me that maybe this was from a drop target bank to help keep the reset platter centered. If it was shorter, it could cock to either side, perhaps. So that's what some of those numbers and letters might mean in a coil you're looking at. Now, that being said, the way Stern does it now is really simple. I'm sure that there's something internally how they put these things together and some of the part numbers depending on like what coil sleeve that they might use, but even though we can't read the raw information about this coil, the part number makes a little more sense. I don't know. What are y'all saying? Colin, what kind of coil would I use if I want the vuck to make the ball fly and smash against the glass? I don't know. Upkickers usually have a really strong coil, right? Because we need to send the ball up against gravity, right? If we're kicking the ball around on a play field, it's rolling, but we need to send a ball up with enough force to make it up and then through a wire form. Generally, upkicker coils are really strong. A lot of the time, they're 23800s. Megaform, follow for how long? Please rephrase that question. I'm not following exactly what you're saying, but thank you for chatting, your first message. Sometimes different part number suffixes are to allow the sales department to change to. Fair enough. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into these names, but sometimes they're pretty easy to break down. Still waiting for my guest. I'm very excited for him to show up and he can kind of tell us more about coils and actual bits of pinball information. So yeah, otherwise, how are you guys doing? How's everything going in pinball land? We kind of just straight jumped into this today. Is this making sense? Are there any things that I can try to demystify or make more confusing by using stupid analogies? Because I'm good at that. Water's delicious. Yeah, I'm glad that it's fun to be rated by other people, especially when they were working on pinball games. That's really fun. It's great that more people are out there working on their games and showing other people how to do it. I don't know how to wind my own coils, but I know Andrew does. We're just waiting for him. The coils are round on machines, so like, as far as I understand, I mean, you've got a bobbin that goes on a machine. The wire is wrapped around one of these lugs, and then you have a machine that just goes and starts winding, right? Around like a weaving machine, and it goes from one end to another, to another, and to another. You know, the new ones are all computer controlled. The old ones were controlled with levers and gears, and it's crazy how those things work. You know what's cool is like someone like Steve Young of the Pinball Resource. I mean, he has those old coil machines. Steve Young winds a lot of the coils that he produces, and some of them which we sell, you know, to round out our catalog, or round on those old manual, non-computer controlled coil machines. Probably the same ones that made coils for Gottlieb way back in the day. Where a lot of these coils, like for our high-selling coils and stuff like that, those are wound by Andrew on fancy new coil machines that still require a lot of hands-on work. This is not all automated. All of these diodes are soldered on by hand. All of the wires are attached to the lugs by hand. It's still a lot of work. Can I make a cargument? Oh yeah, let's start relating pinball and cars, because that makes a lot of sense. Colin Baxter is solving some ridiculous annoying board problems he has with his Lethal Weapon game. I wish you luck. Retro Gaming with Hopper, what's up, man? No pinball today, or arcade video game day. Uh-oh. Yeah, it happens. Sometimes you have to work on those evil video games. It's a requirement sometimes. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. A guitar pickup is essentially, it is a coil. A guitar pickup is a bunch of wire wrapped around a bit of ferrous metal that picks up the changes in the electromagnetic field and produces beautiful sound. It's very, very similar to a guitar pickup, absolutely. I learned my first foray into soldering and electronics, other than like remote control cars and stuff, was working on amplifiers and guitars when I was poor and couldn't afford things in a band. Back when I was a teenager and stuff like that. Way back in the day. Jim Graham, hello. Welcome to the channel. We're talking about coils and waiting for our special guest here. Eventually. Hopefully. I'm going to cross my fingers. If not, he'll just have to come next week and we'll just have to talk about coils some more. I guess one thing I could potentially do is, we could go and install these coils into Baywatch. I kind of would like Emoto to be here just because she can like move the camera around and do all that stuff. I might wait just a few more minutes, but I mean, shucks, we've already been at this for an hour, so. Let me drink a little bit more water here. I think this is a coil for a magnet, like a crane game. Put a big ferrous rod through there and it will do crane game type things. I don't know why that's in there. I think this is the same thing too. These are both crane coils. This is way too big of a bobbin to be a pinball coil. You can see like what is inside your coil. It's a slinky. He won't be demonstrating how to wind our own coils. Thankfully, unless you're working on a really obscure or old pinball game, there's really no reason to wind your own coils. But you could. He is an expert on all things coils and has been in the pinball world for a very long time. Is a very knowledgeable and awesome person to talk to. Coils make the world go around, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, a starter is an electromechanical device. I mean, like all motors are essentially work on the same principle as a coil, or it works within similar principles. Same thing with alternators on a car, stuff like that. Rebuilt the starter on your truck. That's pretty cool. That is actually really cool. I used to rebuild starters for old 1970s, 60s, 80s BMW motorcycles. That was fun. If you wind your own coils, do you get hipster cred? Of course you do. Yeah, Digirati brings up like one of the biggest points. Without like a massive amount of patience, it's really hard to get a uniform coil. I mean, look at this. Do you see how flat that is? It'd be. I mean, go grab a shoelace and a toilet paper roll, or something similar, or a pencil, and wrap that thing around. Tie like 3 shoelaces together and try to lay that thing down and make it as flat as possible. It's not easy. Dwayne the Bathtub. Respected pinball guy recently recommended taking off 125 winds to make a pop bumper coil more active without high tapping the whole game. Is that information correct? Absolutely. It would absolutely do that. And I definitely would not recommend high tapping your game. What I would recommend is, I mean, instead of doing that, why not convert all of your pop bumpers on said game to DC? Run a bridge rectifier to that area, create some DC power, and run that DC power to all of your pop bumper coils. Williams in the 70s used DC power for their flippers, slingshots, and pop bumper coils to make the game more active. Generally, though, I really try to steer people away with almost all of my words and ability to not like hot rod or pump up the power of their electromechanical games. I mean, pop bumpers, like, okay, I can see that, but yeah, I mean, if that's what you want, then you should give that a shot. That's absolutely something you can do to make them a little bit more powerful, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point, Paul on YouTube. Sometimes that lacquer-coated wire on a pinball or a coil is good to repair small traces. I tend to use something called, it's a brand name, it's called Kynar, but it's an plastic insulated wire that is pretty flexible. And I like to use that on circuit boards just to be extra careful, but that is a good tip. I don't know. I'll challenge you. Make 3,000 perfect winds and tell me if that works out okay. Oh yeah, no, at the old shop, we never threw coils away. We'd throw them in a box and take them to the recycler and get pennies, but it's worth it when you have bazillions of coils that are burnt up and melted. So, your Grand Prix has DC pop coils. Yep, most Williams games from like 1971 until they stopped making electromechanical games used DC power for flippers, slingshots, and pop bumpers. It just increased the action of the game. And again, that's if you had a Gottlieb that you really wanted to hot rod the pop bumpers, instead of taking the time to unwind 125 windings, it's almost just as easy to wire in a bridge rectifier and just turn them DC. Digirati, yeah, that's exactly why I don't recommend anybody ever high tap their EMs. Just make things tight, rebuild them exactly the way they should be, and generally you'll have a pleasurable playing experience. Once you've done all that and you still find that you need more power, well, maybe it's time to start making little adjustments here and there, but when you high tap something, you start to break plastics, break targets, and you'll just be sad that you're ruining things that are unobtainium. Oh, I think I recognize those knees.
What?
Hey, do you want a drink?
I mean, usually.
Are you ready to come on camera?
Not really, but I will.
Well, we're just talking crap.
Are we?
Yeah.
Excellent. That's a perfect fit for me.
Here, take a mic. Oh, do you have the...
Oh, I have the thing. You want the thing?
Yeah. Andrew's here, everybody. Here, let me swap some cameras around so we can see Andrew. I had to coerce him. Slightly. Oh, crap. How do I work this? Oh, that. All right.
No one said there'd be sushi here.
No. Emoto requested some delicious sushi.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
And on the floor was what you were hoping? Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
you keep throwing. Don't be anxious. These people like you. You're in the chat.
Say those
I
people.
thought you got stage fright.
I always get stage fright.
Someone who winds guitar pickups by hand. Well, that's scary and exciting.
That is scary. I guess I should put this nearer to my head than.
Oh, here, put your microphone on
yeah,
first.
I just bought a fancy new microphone.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
brought-
Riley.
yeah.
You didn't sell it on eBay.
I tried throwing it on the floor repeatedly though.
Multiple
Where
times.
were you hiding?
In the podcast room in a meeting.
Oh. Oh yeah.
I'm
Thank you.
back. Welcome to Pintech Live.
Yeah, we've just been talking about coils, and I've probably said a lot of wrong things, but I'm gonna get us some fizzy beverages because we're gonna have like a round table discussion on stuff.
Is this thing on?
Did you push the on button?
Yes, it's on. Here, let me help you.
All right. We've got friend of the show, APB Enterprises
Hey,
here.
nice. Doing some yingling. Nice.
Yeah, only Pennsylvania's finest beer for us folks in South Carolina.
I have to sit or I'm like abbreviated. It's weird.
Is it not working? Here, I'll be quiet. It's working.
Hello.
Test 1, 2.
Is it not working?
You're afraid I wear this one in Baywatch.
It's not for Baywatch. It is for
Check,
Johnny
check.
Mnemonic.
Oh, is it really?
Hey.
Well, that was a big part of the book. Did you ever read that book?
I didn't know.
Part of the beginning of the book was just like about how
Here,
the
just put this on.
It's this.
U.S. government and the military got like dolphins addicted
thanks.
to heroin so they could do missions for the military.
Oh, good for them.
So that was a big plot point of the book, but it was a very brief point of the film. But
Nice.
anyways,
Oh no.
all right, Internet, we have Andrew here.
Hello, internet.
Yeah.
Sorry, I need to look over here, not over there. I
Yeah.
can see myself over here, so I'm.
Dude, yeah, that's why I'm always constantly looking at
Up
that
that?
when
Yeah.
I'm streaming and you just see my...
Sure. Do what you need to do.
Friend of the show.
Our first subscriber, our
for
longest
having me.
subscriber, our favorite moderator.
Hello. Can you hear me whispering? I think it works now. There is a dongle.
Oh, it's working now?
It's now pinball and ASMR stream.
Yeah, remember the stream I did 2 hours of just
Thank
straight
you.
sanding?
I'm going to wrap it up, but you're good.
Wherever you want.
Yep.
I have
everybody.
faith.
Yeah, so basically we started the stream talking a little bit about coils, and then we started talking about the principles of coils.
Ah.
We were talking about part nomenclature, we were talking about why lower resistance means something a little bit stronger,
Generally.
blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to go from here? Because people were talking about the construction of coils and how that goes, what it is, how do you make these things? You are the expert.
So there's a couple ways we do it. We have bench winders, which are just exactly what it sounds like. It's a machine that's on a bench. It's usually made to make a couple thousand coils a day. If you wanted to do that, you could make about 1,000 out of that machine. Just the winding step, and it's kind of like a CNC, sort of. It's got a traverse and an X-axis, a spindle, that kind of thing, and does exactly what you expect. It pulls wire off of a bigger spool and puts it onto a little one.
So okay, so how much involvement does a human need to have with the machine? If we came in and we wanted to make a 23800, what
Yep.
do we do?
It depends on, there's some factors. Every coil requires me to put it in the machine itself and start it on the machine we use all the time.
One bobbin.
So yeah, I do have a machine that'll do 8 at a time. But we don't use it a terrible lot because you have to be making a lot of coils in order to do that. Basically this just gets loaded onto the arbor and you feed the wire and wrap it around the lug. That's the starting lug. There's this little flange, so you make sure the wire goes underneath the flange. The purpose of that is to isolate the starting side of the coil from the coil itself.
Is that the flange right there?
Yep.
That you use?
Yeah, if you can show that, that would be great.
Can you bring up the?
Yep, there you go. So that little flange stops the wire from shorting out, basically, on the coil itself when it's being used, or if there's a weird abrasion.
This thing's so ruined. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, it's really busted. Go ahead and break it. This one too. There actually, this has got a flange on it,
Oh, yeah.
doesn't it? Yeah,
Perfect.
use the bottom of that guy.
Destroyed it.
We
Yeah,
tore
it's
that
too
one
late.
apart.
Yeah, so this is the flange I'm talking about. So I wrap this by hand, and it goes then through the hole, which is a distinctly pinball thing. It's not much used in other parts of the world as far as coil winding. And it goes underneath this little flange, and that just stops it so it doesn't you don't get a short in the rest of the coil, especially if something goes wrong. Although the enamel on this wire is extremely rugged, so it's unlikely to go wrong, but it can. And then you start the machine. Every coil takes between like 15 and 2 minutes to run, depending on how many turns and gauge and that kind of thing. And then when it's done, I cut the wire and I wrap the other lug and solder it later is a whole nother step. But that's the actual like winding process itself. We have a tray set up with just a bunch of them on there. Every coil I start, I generally guide the first like 2 layers, and that's to get the first layer of the coil really flat so that you don't get a real lumpy coil like you can see on this one.
We had a pretty lumpy one earlier.
So I'm going to ruin the wrapper on this. But you can see how it's not very even. And
compared to like this very thin secondary gauge wire, which is extremely flat.
Yeah, it's flat, but it suffers from the same problem. It's just harder to tell because that's 34 gauge wire. So like you can't tell that that's like super lumpy. If that was a really big gauge wire, you would notice
really
it more.
easy. Yeah.
So I don't know if you have like a really flat one, but anyways, laying the first layer down really well, the first couple layers helps the rest of the coil go.
Like this Capcom coil. Look at that.
That's an exceedingly well-made coil.
Yeah.
So, and based on the era of this coil, like when that was made, it was probably done on a computer-controlled winder.
So that's what I was going to ask. So you said you have a bench winder. I was kind of trying to describe, we were talking about like electronic windings.
Yep.
Right? So they existed from the 30s until X amount of time. And they made almost all these coils for a lot of manufacturers. And
lot of them.
Smaller companies too, like, we mentioned the Santucci just because I know that they don't exist anymore. But we were kind of talking about like the industries that existed in Chicago to support the other manufacturing, right?
Sure.
Multiple shops that would make play fields for these video game cabinet companies, or there's multiple coil winders. But
there were, and transformer winding was often done at those places as well. It's a whole other process that we don't do because it requires a lot of extra machinery and an oven, and there's like steps.
Well, so let's go back to the 60s then, and I'm Gottlieb. I'm a dude that works at Electronic Windings, and I have to make whatever, A51, whatever, some made-up coil. How does that machine work? How do you set that thing work for limits? And do you have machines like that?
I do. So there are like basically 2 types of machines. Well, really 3, but we only have like 2 of them. One is a computer-controlled winder, and that basically is exactly what it sounds. It has a program in it that tells you how many turns, the length of the coil, that kind of thing.
And when we're talking about length of the coil, we're talking about the distance between the bobbin ends? Okay.
Yep, physically how long, and this is a great example. Like this is probably the biggest modern coil we would see, but if you go back in time to, the old, this is what out of a reset or something on the bottom of a Williams pinball.
I don't know. I think
so you can see the size difference.
I know that this is a reset coil here. That's a 100-volt big boy. But
yeah, these 2 are related actually. They were run on the same tool back in the day the bobbin was. So some of these are getting harder to find coil-wise, which is interesting, or bobbin-wise, which is interesting. But so I lost train of thought.
Mechanical machines, how to set the mechanical machines up versus a computer?
Yeah, the computer ones actually just run like with a program. It tells you input all the variables. It kind of does its own thing. If you program it really precisely, most bobbins that are used in pinball can result in a coil that is like this, perfect looking. There are a bunch of variables in that because the diameter of the wire can change like mid-spool. So spools of copper that, like this little spool of copper, which is probably about 4.5 ounces of copper, comes off of another bigger spool. And the bigger spool is between 40 and 100 pounds in my operation. They have larger ones, but we don't use those just because of the nature of the thing we make. So the average size is like 80 pounds for the big spool. Anyways, you can program it to be super precise, but in that 80 pounds of wire, the diameter of the wire at the beginning can be different than the diameter of the wire at the end. And it's amazing because we're talking about like hundredths or thousandths of an inch difference, but it adds up, right? So every layer, you end up getting a little more loss, and the machine can't keep up, or the wire is going too far ahead, and that causes issues and can make the coil lumber. You have people interacting.
Someone says speak up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a mic right here. Is it me you want to speak up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, wait. Okay, so how much? One of your mics went dead. Emoto, wait, can you pull up your mic pack?
Yes, it's on. It's
Is it blue?
It has their lights. They're pretty. Can you hear me? Test 1, 2.
Hold on. The hard part is it's always hard to have 2 microphones in vicinity. Can you do some speaking?
We're having audio issues.
Yeah, Andrew's mic isn't working anymore. What'd you do to pick it up when it wasn't working?
I just plugged in the new dongle.
Should we just go to the should we just go to the big mic?
Hello, test. Which one is me on the graph? Top one?
Both. We're coming in on the same channel, but mine's just a lot louder.
Stop, Andrew.
Test 1, 2. Check, check.
Might be too good. Well, I'll do some more tests on it. Let's just
Okay.
do it this way.
Do you want? Okay, yeah, that way works too, huh?
That's what I get for buying a very affordable lavalier replacement
Aw.
instead of $200 one.
Great.
Thanks for letting us know.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Yeah, sorry that you couldn't hear me. I don't know.
Start all over from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean,
Walking in from the front.
no, that's it. And opening the coat and then walking back there and wandering around.
People were saying you were muffled, so I think they heard most of the description of wire, how you lay things in.
Okay.
I don't know. So let's start from there. So we were talking about the difference in width being extremely small throughout one spool, which can make things goofy.
Oh yeah, I mean, so there's enamel on all this wire, and the enamel can basically, and even the copper can change diameter from the beginning of an 80-pound spool to the end of it.
So is that so? I've always called it like a varnish, but
It's varnish.
It is a varnish.
Yeah, it's a appropriate term for it. It's just an enamel finish, a specific kind that's used in coil winding.
Okay.
It's actually super well suited for the thing we do with it, which is nice because it doesn't require stripping if you solder correctly, and there's a bunch of cool things like that go on.
Someone did ask earlier, just how are the wires separated? We talked about that about an hour ago, but we were
Sure.
talking about how, one of the downhill spirals of a failing coil is when the varnish does start to melt, and then wires start creating shorts, and then it gets hotter, and then it keeps melting, and So, but it is very, very tough. I was trying to show
Extremely
people
tough, yeah.
how you can go like this and just kind
Yeah, strip it off.
and it was actually a lot harder than I remember.
Yeah, the better demonstration would be to put it in that flux and hit it with a lighter.
Really,
So it would come
just
right
melt
off.
right off.
Yeah, it would come right off. Yeah, so the varnish on this specific kind of wire melts at around 700 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's a delicate balance because let's say the bobbin probably melts at like 400 degrees. So when you're soldering it, you have to make sure that you're not going to melt the bobbin, lugs out of the bobbin when
Sure.
you're done. That
Oh,
would
yeah.
be extremely disappointing and make me sad. But I've certainly done that a lot in
I've done
my
that many
days.
times.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, but that varnish, the enamel coat, can change the thickness of the wire from the beginning to the end. Even the copper could be slightly different, but I have more faith in the extrusion of the copper than I do on the application of the enamel.
Of the enamel. Yeah. Okay. Well, what about so if that's how we build a single wound coil? What about a dual wound coil? What is the process of winding 2 coils in one?
So basically, in our environment, we usually have 2 machines set up. We didn't get back to the mechanical winding versus. We'll come back to that in a second.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we have 2 machines set up. The reason I remembered that is because the winder that puts the secondary on, which one was it? This one that you had? This type of coil, like a Williams flipper coil, the secondary, I actually have a machine that's dedicated to doing that because it's driven by gears. That machine is older than me. It's from the late 60s. And basically, on that machine, if you change the length of the bobbin or the wire that's being applied to the bobbin, you have to take you literally open the covers up and you look at this like complex chart and you figure out which like 3 gears you need, and then you have to unscrew all the parts and switch the gears around and put it all back together. And
So kind of
then
like
you also have to still set the starting point of the coil winder, and then you have to set the amount of turns, and that changes depending on the machine. So that's kind of how the mechanical ones work. But in this case, with the secondary winding, what we do is we wind the first wind on there. I do with my computer-controlled bench winder. And then there's a step in between that the people that work with me do where they apply tape. Actually, if you look inside of there, you might be able to see it. I don't know if it's in there, but there's masking tape. I'm going to call it masking tape. It's just an electrical tape that's between the two layers that mechanically isolate the primary from the secondary. And then this piece of tape is to also isolate all those wires from being overrun by the coil itself. Once the people I work with are done putting the tape on, it then goes into the other machine, and the same process starts again. We wrap the lug, depending on the spec of the coil, and then it runs and puts on a couple thousand turns usually of wire.
So why would you still use those mechanical coil winding machines when it seems like a computer one is a little easier to set parameter-wise?
Yeah. The primary reason is because the velocity of that coil being manufactured, like we sell enough of them that it makes sense to just leave that machine set up and running the same thing all the time.
The mechanical ones.
The mechanical ones.
You
right.
said, yeah, okay, yep, because when we change the parameter or what we're winding, we have to go in and open it up, change
There's
gears,
a
and
huge turnover time, right?
So it's
the machine's
easier to
down,
set.
I'm idle. I'm not making a coil. I'm doing a thing to get ready to make a coil, but I'm not making money doing that. So
you have your 26-1200 machine, your 23-800 machine, and then
So there's like the two bench winders that we use the most are the computer controlled ones, and those ones are they make like basically anything that we make can be made on those and have been made on those depending on the quantity being ordered. And they are easier to configure and set up and do that whole thing. But if we're making a lot of the same thing, then it's like a Williams flipper coil. So the two mechanical machines basically run like Williams coils because that's a part that we make a lot.
Sure.
And there's some commonality between flipper coils and wire gauge, and that makes it easier as well to justify using the machine where there's just a turns count difference. That AQ coil that you had earlier, or J coil, so there was like it was one of the little flipper coils. If you think of like AQ 25-500, 34-4500, or 34-50-50, like it's the same wire, it's just a different amount of turns. So that's a perfect fit for one of those mechanical winders where I'm not changing the bobbin size or the wire size all the time. So it gives us the advantage of not having to constantly set the thing up, which is good.
I can picture. I think I need to see one day, but I can picture and I understand what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
It's neat. I think most people that do watch, I think no one said anything, so I think everyone is just very much listening. But I think a lot of the people here are very curious about how things work, but also how things are made. I definitely find things, I was on YouTube the other night, and my wife and I started watching, History Channel has like every single episode of Modern Marvels.
Yeah,
like
nice.
I just forgot how cool that show was way back in the day.
The show is cool.
It was pretty neat, but like seeing how things are made is just so fascinating.
Yeah, that's part of why I got into doing it. I enjoy making things, and it's a fun experience.
All right, well, let's talk about Andrew then.
Oh, no, God.
We're not talking about APB Enterprises.
Oh, we didn't get back to, there was, you had said in the 60s, how would they have done it? And that's like the mechanical bench winders.
Yeah, okay.
The more interesting period to me is actually if you go back a little bit further into like the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
Why? Because those machines were not initially gear driven. It would be a motor with a spindle, and you would have the operator would be sitting there and the machine would be in front of them, and they would take the like 20 or 30 pound spool of copper and put it on their lap.
Jesus.
And then the coil would be loaded into the machine. And they would guide, that's probably a 50s coil right there, right? And they would actually guide, so the traverse would be a human being. They would have a little felt thing that would go on their fingers so they don't get burned by the wire getting pulled through their fingers, and they would guide the coil by hand to get it completely wound, which is just amazing to me because I've tried doing that, and let me tell you that it's not easy. I prefer the computer method or the like slightly guided method with a tool.
Dang.
But yeah, that was amazing to me that was how it was done, and there's actually a picture hanging in our shop, which is like, it's like Westinghouse or GE or one of those companies back then, and it's just a giant room full of people with like spools of wire in their lap, guiding the coils by hand. It really is.
It's nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And it's crazy to think, though, too, like, I bet you there was like some Polish lady in one of those factories that could wind a coil that did look like
That looked
this.
like there were
Like,
definitely
absolutely
people that
perfect.
could completely wind a perfect coil. The other thing that's interesting about like this kind of like coil, like this is, I marvel at how well this is made.
It's beautiful.
Right, because 23 gauge wire is actually kind of hard to get completely flat. And if you order like a 23-900 from me, the chance of me winding it by hand all the way to the end, so by hand means on the machine and I'm guiding the wire as it's being applied, the chance of me winding that by hand was pretty good, because a 23-900 on this size bobbin, the 23-800 size bobbin, a 23-900 would actually spill off the coil if you didn't make it completely flat.
Got it. Yeah, we look at this, like the actual diameter of the wire on this 23-800 basically sits flush with the top of the bobbin there.
Yep,
It's
so
beautiful.
you can see the gap that's left. So this is 800 turns. 900 turns is almost 2 full more layers on this coil. So you have one more coming out to the end and one more going back. So, and when it gets down to the end, if you're going quick enough and it's ever so slightly off, it's going to want to hop over the flange. So a lot of 23-900s, or I start making it as a 23-900 and then it goes wrong, and I'll stop the machine and make it a 23-850, or I'll stop the machine and make it a 23-800, because I don't want to scrap all the copper on the coil, and I don't want to spend the time building another coil basically. So that's kind of
This one's too pretty to put back in that box.
Yeah,
Even
no,
though
that's
it's broken, I'm going to glue this back together.
Yeah, you can, absolutely. And that coil, I make them, so I probably, I don't want to tell too many secrets, but you definitely could, you could glue that. It would be fun.
That's what I was
If the flange could go in and if the sleeve can go in and out of the coil easily, no problem at all. Then there's absolutely no reason to not use it, basically, unless you're worried about, something coming so far loose that it shorts out on a mechanism or does something.
And that's what we were kind of talking about. It's like, someone was like, "Why do you have all these?" And it's like, well, the company was going to throw them away, but I decided to rescue them, kind of for art. But there's some that are usable. This is not as usable as others, but
And some of these are mine. This is one that I made, and then it got unfortunately broken, probably in shipping. This is one of mine. Nope, that's not one of mine. That's a different supplier. You okay?
And that is something for you guys to think about and consider. There still are...
You want this over here? I don't know where to go now. It's so bad.
Everyone's like, don't move the microphone, Emoto. It's perfect. And I was like, it's blocking Kyle's face.
There are multiple...
Oh, the microphone is blind. I'm sorry, Kyle.
manufacturers of
You
coils.
should have
No, it's
blocked my
okay.
face.
And look at this one, right? The bobbin is broken.
Yep, still work fine.
But I could totally use this in my game.
You could.
Maybe not put it in a customer's
Put that in
game,
there. See how well does that fit. If that sleeve goes through there, then you're good to go. Yep.
So, anyways, it's some of those.
And that's on day one, like when people come and start working at the factory with me for the first time, like the first conversation about production that we have is don't ever drop a coil. If you drop a coil, it will break just about every time. Once it's wound, they are very delicate and don't like being dropped. Probably more than about a foot, and you're out of luck. I don't want to tell anybody about the time I dropped a tray of 50 FL11629s.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I broke half of them.
I picked up.
Yeah, there's a lot of weight in that box. All that copper's sitting there, man.
It was so hard for me to put it on this table.
Yeah.
I'm gonna steal this.
Here we go. We can go back, and people were asking. We were trying to. I was like, well, you can decipher a lot of these nonsensical part numbers.
Yep.
There are charts that tell you how, but
There
here
are.
we go. So the 5030, which would be the left flipper in Baywatch, is a 23-1100. There you go.
Yep.
23 gauge wire wrapped around the bobbin 1100 times. And
Stern
this one is garbage.
and Sabato probably would probably still work. Stern and Sega and Data East before it were pretty good about labeling their coil as what the thing was. And even Williams as well, most of their coils until you get to like FL11629. So they were protective of how this was made, and they didn't label it that way for a specific reason because they didn't want to tell you the secret to what's inside of this coil. And in fact, now if you try to look up how is an FL, like what are the turns on an FL11629, you would have a hard time finding that data. the reason we know is I actually have a machine that reverse engineers coils that you stick. It's like a machine with a probe, and you hook up these clips, and it'll tell you how many turns are on there, and then we use a micrometer to
Measure
the diameter of the wire, and that'll give me wire gauge and turns, and yeah, it's good times.
What kind of coil wrapper did Williams use back in the day? It was almost like a shiny printed masking tape. There is science to that, right?
It is a shiny printed masking tape. Yeah, that is.
But they have properties, right?
They do. It's important to know that like tapes that go into coils generally have temperature ratings with them, so that's kind of the one variable that's important. So they probably did temperature and flammability testing on the coils. We go with this type of wrapper because when you order that tape type of coil, so people have bought, you can buy replacement like FL11629 labels that look like the original. Yep. Marco carries them on their website. That material is fine for sprucing up your own game, or if you were to make tons and tons of them, you could justify doing that, like for my position, right? When we have tape made, it's actually a really large spool of this tape that you put like on just a normal tape dispenser, and it takes a long time to go through it, and you have a shelf life, which can be, so like if you don't, and you have like a minimum order quantity, right? So I got to get 6 of these giant spools, and I just like, you have to have a big order to support it, basically. So this label is actually printed in-house and cut in-house on a CNC die cutting machine. And that allows us flexibility of not having, I have the blank material sitting around all over the place, but I don't have anything pre-printed. So you get rid of the shelf life issues, you're getting rid of like the diversity of part number issues. So we make about 800 different SKUs in coils. So that's everything from these flippers to these little relays. We have specs, pictures, data on just about everything made or used in a pinball machine back to the 40s. So that would be a lot of labels for us to keep. And there are some coils where we literally sell 5 a year. I usually make something like that as a favor. There's like some weird part and we need 5, and I'll do it as time permits. But because I want to keep games running, so we'll support the hobby that way if we can, and it's good.
Cottage Industry Manufacturing. CNK, this is Andrew Barney, friend of the show, goes by APB Enterprises in the chat. Here, took a trip to South Carolina to come visit. How long would it take someone to wrap 1,100 turns of 23 gauge wire on a coil by hand?
Yeah.
And solder it to the correct terminals? I mean, what? Are we thinking like that's like
it would take a while.
An hour?
Yeah, for sure.
Plus,
I would not want to do it.
I would lose count of how many turns I've got and then have to start over multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a good trick, too, is you figure out how many turns are in a layer, and then you count how many layers. That's a tricky way to do it. So, like, if a coil is wound super well and I don't know how many turns it is, I can do a quick estimate by looking through the end of the coil, and you can see, like a tree, right? There's different layers. Count the rings, and then you can count across how many windings are on one layer and do multiplication, and you're going to be within, probably 5 turns at that point.
Interesting. Yeah. That's a fun way. I'd never thought about it that way.
Yep. Huh? Yeah, I mean, the machine makes it easier, but sometimes it's just a thing that's like, or if I don't have access to the machine because I'm out in the field somewhere or whatever comes up, sometimes people are like, what is this? Just trying to mess with me. So.
Because you're the coil guy?
Yeah,
you can obviously identify it.
I can look at it and just intuit what's in there.
Like, I know what this is. Yeah. Andrew, why do you care about pinball? Why and what and how and what is some of your background?
Yeah, so I got into pinball like a lot of people do as a kid, right? So in the early mid '80s. So I, like when I think of pinball and the first experiences I had with pinball, I think of Comet and maybe Jokers and Cyclone and Whirlwind. So that's a little more late '80s. But my brother was really awesome and wanted me to be included in going to the arcade. And I would go to the arcade with him. And he would play pinball or whatever video games he wanted. I generally played, actually when I was younger, I played video games. But my first experiences with pinball were back in the arcade. And I enjoyed it, but as a kid it's kind of hard, right? You're about the height of the the glass, which makes the game kind of hard to play.
Different perspective.
Slightly different perspective for sure, and definitely not designed for that. But so that's kind of how I got into it back then. I actually didn't, I kind of got away from it like a lot of people did, right? To like the late '80s, early '90s, like it died off and then had a resurgence and like. Life happened and all that. But my brother actually started collecting games, and that got me interested in it. He picked up, I think, one of his first games was probably in the early '90s. And then I got my first game, which was a Strange Science. When I moved to New Hampshire, I worked out with Best Buy actually for a while. And I moved out there for work, and someone had a barn. Uh-oh.
The camera just died.
It did.
Keep going.
Oh, no. Oh, it's saying things. The operation and safety of this battery
It's the most Japanese thing I've ever read. The operation and safety of this battery
cannot be guaranteed. Would you like to continue?
Yeah,
I want to be on the risky side of this.
Yeah,
Let's
me
do
too.
it. I hope it's not lithium ion.
Yeah, keep going. Okay, so and it's funny actually. You say Best Buy for a while. Didn't you work for Best Buy for like 20 years?
28 years I worked for Best Buy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's a whole other conversation.
That's
we can
probably
have.
a long one.
But so Strange Science. Okay.
Yeah, I had a Strange Science. I got out of a barn in New Hampshire, and I did the thing that a lot of first-time pinball collectors. I got in the car and drove away, and then 15 minutes later turned around and went back and got the legs. Which would have been a problem because it was my first game, and I didn't even know that Marco Specialties was a thing, and I didn't even know that there were like people selling pinball parts. And
Yeah.
my brother then helped me with that too, so he helped me get it going and get it tuned up, and told me about the wonderful folks at Marco and how to get parts and some tips and tricks on how to maintain them, and it was fun. So that was kind of it.
What kind of arcades did you frequent growing up in Chicago? Were you aware how special that was, or how important pinball was, in the city? Like, was that ever something you?
The importance and the special nature of pinball at that age to me was that my brother made time to go with me to the arcade.
Okay.
And was very kind to take me there, because someone who is markedly older than me, bringing their smaller sibling with in teenage years is pretty challenging. So I'm thankful for those experiences. But yeah, I had no real idea that it was such a unique place, and that everything was made there for the most part, and a lot of pinball folks were there. Like, none of that was obvious to me until much later. For sure. So
When was the first pinball expo you went to, or did you attend any other pinball events prior to your first pinball expo?
yeah, I think I'm not sure that I can answer that with any statement
Definity.
of I'm not going to be for sure, but I think 98 or 99 was my first pinball expo. I have a very vivid memory of all the Pin 2000s lined up on the wall at Expo.
Wow.
And you could walk up to the tournament, and it would take your picture, and then when you'd go play the game, it would know who you are and show a picture if you got a high score, which I didn't, because a little secret, I've been playing pinball for a significant portion of my life, and I'm not good at it. But it's fun, which is the important part. And I get to meet really awesome people, which is a pretty cool benefit. But I do remember that going on. I remember all the re-imports that were there, like Container Games and stuff like that. Ben France was a guy I remember meeting him way back, and he just had 8 Addams families, and they were $1,200, and they looked like Container Games. But
good old
we
days.
would absolutely flip out, no pun intended, for that cost point at this point in the career. I think probably Rick Sheevy is a local person who repaired games and made some multi-game stuff and was in the industry and knew a lot of industry folks. He would have parties right around the time of Expo, and I remember going to his house a few times, and I just don't know if it's at the same time or before Expo or whatever, but I met some industry people back then and didn't even know. I played Twilight Zone. I think it was Twilight Zone with Pat Lawler, and I had no idea. He just played, he won, and I wasn't that good. And it was a cool experience, and I had no idea who he was. And my brother came over, and he was like, "Do you know who that guy was?" And I'm like, "I know he's a cool dude. Played pinball with me, right?" And he's like, "That's the guy who designed the game." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Like,
Neat.
No wonder he like really whooped me." He's played it more than I have, but it was cool. So his house was quite an experience, and he still fixes games and supports the industry in Illinois to this day. Rick Sheevy does, so it's cool.
That sounds like a fun party.
And then of course my brother's house, which was always kind of an arcade at that point. He had he kind of comboed. He had a lot of video games and a lot of pinball machines. So there was like almost a 50-50 split probably at that point. He had some fun stuff to play, so it was always nice going over and hanging out with him and getting to see his collection. It was cool.
Well, your brother still has a lot of games, right? He
does.
bought a Godzilla. Well, he bought a Godzilla.
He did.
When I met him in Milwaukee, right?
Yeah, at MGC, right after MGC, yeah. He got a Godzilla. I think he got a Dialed In back sometime.
It's a great game.
It is. He loves them both, yeah. But yeah, he's got a good collection. There's, I couldn't even tell you how many machines there are. I could probably name some of them, but
more than 10.
More than 10, yeah, for sure. And he's still got several of his like key video games that he likes. He's got a sit-down Spy Hunter, which is
really
completely awesome.
Oh wow!
Got a sit-down Star Wars, which is completely awesome.
Oh wow! Holy moly!
My favorite, one of my favorite video games of all time, Marble Madness. He's got an incredibly nice example of Marble Madness that I love playing. I'm very aggressive when I play that game, but it's a fun time for sure.
Paul on YouTube asked what your favorite game is.
It's a tricky question. I can tell you by genre which games I enjoy. I don't know that I have one. Maybe.
Body.
Yeah, I'm contractually obligated to answer hard body when anyone asks. So next question.
What's your favorite 90s game? Williams, Bally, Bally, Williams, Gottlieb, Capcom. What?
I tend to like games that people would consider odd. I'm one of 3 people in the world that likes Popeye.
It's a great game.
It is a great game. So there's 4 of us. I didn't know you were in that crowd. I like Star Trek. It's a challenging game. Next Gen is fun. I don't know that I have one that sticks out in my head like as a holy grail. I'd love to get a Shadow. I've been trying to tell Marco that Shadow is actually mine, and he hasn't believed me. There's one in the studio with us here.
Yeah, you don't want that one though, because look at that translate. It's terrible.
I mean, I can get a new translate.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's actually inside the game.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Actually, let's change it. Let's change it.
We should switch see if he notices. Apparently, Marco is a big fan of that game as well. So I don't know that I'm gonna. Game. I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to borrow that from him. But
I will make it happen. We're gonna actually I'm gonna force Andrew to potentially be on this show again sometime. So maybe we'll work on the Shadow one day, and that might involve changing the translate. Yeah. What about modern games? So if we think like 20, like from the advent of JJP until now, or so any what is something you like
Is the
now?
advent of JJP considered Lord of the Rings still, because the LE backglass thing was kind of around that whole time frame?
Well, I guess I would say I was thinking more like 2010 to now, but the turn of the century actually is an important decade for pinball. That was a very make or break time for the industry.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, for
you
sure.
bought a Lord of the Rings new in box, and you still own it, right?
And I still own it, and I will be probably buried in that game.
Good.
I've left that as a set of instructions that just if there's something in the way, you just get me to fit. It'll be fine. And
No, we cut off your leg.
yeah, fine. I mean, or just leave the coin door open.
Just
either
leave
one's
the coin door open.
is okay. But I love Lord of the Rings. I'm a big fan of the movies. I enjoyed the books. The game is spectacular. I played it the first time I was actually out on a trip in Vegas, and there was one at the MGM Grand, and I'd never played it before, and it looks like a pinball machine at the MGM Grand, so it was kind of dirty and didn't play real well, but it hooked me immediately, and I thought, one day I'll buy this game. Yeah, and I did, and I've kept it. And the very first product APB Enterprises made was a real knocker kit, and it was inspired from the horrible squelching sound that comes out of that era of CERN pinball machine.
God, it's so terrible.
It still has that knocker kit in it to this day, and a bunch of the other mods were all made in there. Some Stern stuff. That was kind of the first, before we made Coils, that was the first couple things I liked sprucing up my game. So It was fun. But yeah, after that era, if we jump ahead, I mean, I'm a big fan of Godzilla. I think that's probably some of their best work, in my opinion. They've made a lot of wonderful games. It just is one that I prefer and I jive with pretty well, and it's good.
It's hard to not say Godzilla.
It is super hard to not say Godzilla. It is really good.
I disagree with that, Dent. My wife very much knows how much all that crap that's in my house is worth. So when I die, she will be getting top dollar for all of my garbage I leave behind. That's actually like one of my biggest existential like fears is like all of the garbage I would leave behind. If I got killed on the way home today, all of the crap my wife would have to sell and deal with, like related to pinball, makes me stressed out.
Can I get first dibs on Baby Pac-Man?
Yes,
It's
actually,
here.
you do
If
have the first dibs on that
If you have
game.
a dolly, you can just...
You could just take it away.
It's a dolly in there.
Dolly
Oh, that's
Parton.
right. It's yeah, I remember seeing that. That's funny.
Sell them for the price you pay for them. No, see, well, that's the thing is I actually have a good relationship with my wife, and I can communicate with her about household expenses and what I buy things for. So my wife knows exactly how much I paid for everything I own almost. But the thing is I also bought a lot of this stuff a long time ago, so I didn't pay much for it. So,
Yeah, what a different time, right? I used
Definitely.
used to flip games, and it's it just is what it is. But you know, I bought Demolition Man for $600 before. It's not something that would happen today.
I paid less than
Like-
$2,000 for my Twilight Zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was only like
even
6
like
to
Lord of the
8
Rings
years ago.
was like what 30, 34, 35 back when it was new.
Yeah,
So-
but if you apply inflation,
Yeah,
I can imagine
it.
that the $4,000 you bought in Lord of the Rings for is more like $7,000 now. You know, like, but it's
yeah, it's a you know, get off my lawn.
yeah.
It's kind of how I feel when I talk about pinball pricing.
Oh
So.
man,
Yeah.
I just paid $2,500 for a Blackout.
Oh, wonderful game too.
But if it was, hey, look, if the game works and it's in good condition, then that's a great price for that game.
We actually make spruced up coils for specifically for Blackout as well.
You make what?
Spruced up flipper coils to give them a little more oomph. That game could use a little more energy in the flip.
If Andrea is available, we might actually have we might do this next week. If
Yeah.
I pull you aside for this one more time, we'll actually talk about oomphed up flipper coils. We were talking about it, like going through the game and showing, look at this shot map. This is a very long shot. This is the coil that was used, and kind of like how designers and engineers might be able to tailor a coil for a specific side of the playfield.
Yep, for
And
sure.
These are identical though, right?
Those are the same coil. Yep.
So we are going to, I think the right flipper is a 50-20, the left flipper is a 50-30.
Okay.
So these will increase the power on both of those shots.
Yes.
But why? So as someone who has told the people that tune in many times not to change flipper coils, you should rebuild your stuff. Don't change willy-nilly.
Yep.
And now I'm going to change a flipper coil.
Yep.
Why? Why am I doing that? Can you explain it better than I could?
I mean, I'm not sure that I can, but I'll try. There's many reasons. You should rebuild your stuff first. If it's not performing well and it's not a brand new game, that's probably a good idea. Put a new sleeve in it. You know, replace the plunger and the stop if they look worn. There are many car GP ways to tune that stuff up if you feel like going that route, but give that all a good tune up before just replacing something, hitting it with a hammer, or you just hit it with a hammer. I don't really care. It's your game. But
your game.
Those other things could make a pretty big improvement in performance of the actual game. Manufacturers, when it gets to certain parts, I think, you know, you have, I have 090, 5020, 20T, 5030. I can choose from this menu of things, and I hope that what I am selecting is close enough to what I need that it performs well. So there's a little bit of that, I think, that goes into it. Like this coil maybe not be an exact fit. I'm not picking on Stern. That was not my intent. It could be the same thing with Williams or any other manufacturer. Like this coil is close enough, and that's the one we use. And they think a lot about that based on, you know, shot length and angles and all the stuff that they do when they design a game. But, you know, sometimes it's not a perfect fit, and we can account for that. Games age, and that changes how they perform beyond just the mechanical parts wearing out. You have electrical changes that happen in the game. You could drive the coil a little less strongly. Power in your wall could be 10 volts lower than the power wound coils. Single wound coils are pulsed on and off at a high rate to change their power, basically, and duty cycle. And that is can have a detrimental effect. Like once it warms up, the heating and cooling of being turned on and off can change the dimensions of the coil. It can change just how the coil operates magnetically, and that can cause issues as well. So sometimes it's just you can get a slightly stronger coil and notice an improvement. When we designed these coils, flipper fade was the primary driving factor in making them, because Lord of the Rings is a challenging game that can go on for a long time. I've seen people play the same game for an hour on Lord of the Rings. So playing the game for an hour straight, like you've heated everything up inside of the machine, and you would experience flipper fade in that specific game. If you've played for an hour, you're probably getting to the point where you're going to get through the last set of multi-balls, and one of those things is knocking the ball out of the ring, and if you are having flipper fade at the same time, you may not have quite enough oomph to get up the ramp and knock the ball out, or you get both balls trapped in there, and that can be like an extremely frustrating event. I know, because that's why we designed Lord of the Rings medium power coils, from that experience.
So the idea is, if we were to simplify it a little bit, we are hot rodding the flipper coil. We are putting a more powerful coil in the game.
Yep.
Marginally.
Marginally. Yep.
It's
It's not a significant jump, but it's a noticeable jump.
But it's enough jump to still end up with like satisfying and suitable performance once some detrimental effects may have come in that
Absolutely.
involve around heat,
Yep.
which is what we talked about.
Yep.
Right? So it's
That's
crazy, but it's not too crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's still funny because such a simple change. I think my friend Rob in Chicago has a Lord of the Rings. He was one of the testers for the game, and then mine and Terry Diswart, we all tested these back in the day, and they were. It took months, like I think 4 months. We were into just tweaking this. I made probably 10 variants of this coil.
Wow.
And this is the one we kind of committee settled on after all of that testing, because we all love the game and pinball, and we wanted to perform real great. And then at some point we decided, hey, we should probably now also sell these, because if we are enjoying it, then I'm sure other people are also going to enjoy it.
You got a request for fishtail coils.
Yeah?
What's wrong with fishtails?
Weak flippers.
Fishtail
And
flipper
then
coil.
also, Lobster Man says their TMNT flipper seems to struggle with getting the ball up there.
What? Well, I mean, I guess I'm curious what coil Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles uses then.
And also, I don't know what's in. I don't recall what's in Fishtails. Yeah,
I think it's the orange coil, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Which one's the orange?
The orange one is technically the one that they don't use, the FL17636, like the super powerful.
Oh, I thought that was this one. I thought it was the 2.9 was the
No,
super.
that's actually one of the most common. That's just like the run of the
the
mill.
blue is the most
Blue
normal
and red
one.
are like the two big.
Then I think it
sellers.
has the orange one. If it's not, wait, what did I say first? Red.
Red is FL11630.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to remember.
So another common. That's the two top sellers are like that. That and 23/800s and 26/1200s. It's like the coil that's used all the time in pinball.
Moto's
Yellow. There might be. I don't know. There could be two oranges too.
Look under the playfield, and then hopefully click on that. Go under the one under the flyer.
Yeah. There you go.
Blue.
Blue.
Oh.
Assuming that
They're not
isn't one of
mucked
my
with.
coils where we put a blue label on something or something in the past, which happens. I mean, it happens. So 629. That's already.
Oh, look. Wait.
Oh well, but that looks like a generic
are
label.
aftermarket,
Can you
yeah.
hit zoom in? That could be like a Wicco coil or something.
No, that's overseas. They
There it
got
is?
those lines. Yeah. That's an
Oh
overseas
yeah, it
coil.
is, huh?
Oh yeah. I see a lot of those coils like from that manufacturer where the diodes are on the wrong way. So if you have coils that look like that, like with everything, because I'm a human, right? I put all the diodes in by hand. We have a quality control check on diode placement, but always verify that your diodes are facing the right way.
Yes.
Wait, what is the right way for the diodes to fit?
It's different depending on part.
Yeah.
So, but you know, sometimes like on those, I'm sure it was fine. But I've seen like in the sample pictures on the internet, the diodes are facing the wrong direction, and if that's how they're shipping them, you can blow up your boards in the game. I don't know how. I mean, like I can't assume there's a major problem, right? Because they've been selling them for years that way. But
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say to Stern Guy with the Lobster Man, that's a great name. Rebuild your flippers first.
yeah,
Right, and
take
I
a
think-
look at your coil stop. That's a key part in
Yeah,
that era
especially
game.
on the Stern games. Yeah. Rebuild your flippers first, see if that solves the problem. Generally, that will solve the problem with Stern games. You know, I think Turtles could be a game that will suffer from flipper fade.
Yep.
Because that game absolutely
Likes
just
the
is
time
multi-ball extravaganza. And there's a lot of long shots on that game as well.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's a SFL kit, Emoto, for the Stern flipper rebuild kit. SFL, not SSFL.
There you go. Oh, look, we searched it before. Huzzah.
Watch, it's not going to come up because our website's crazy. Oh, there it is.
Got it.
Yep, SF. Oh, no, Turtles has 3 flippers, so you would need the SFL kit 2L1R, if I remember right. But I don't remember the layout of the flippers, so. But yeah, I just always start with that, right? And then if you find that the performance is not what you wanted or what you're looking for, then I think that it is okay to change. And we did that with Baywatch.
Yeah.
We're suffering from some flipper fade. It sucks to get up that tall ramp, and that is why we are going to try the Lord of the Rings
coil.
We're gonna put. We're gonna.
I didn't even saw them yet.
We're going to
We are
bring
not.
the Baywatch cast
time.
to the Shire, and
We are going on an adventure.
yeah, we truly
We're,
going.
we're confusing 3 separate games now. That's great.
All right.
Perfect.
What time is it? Wow, look, it's almost like exactly time to end.
It
Does
is.
Does anyone have any questions for? Actually, no one wants to talk to me. Everyone wants to talk to Andrew now.
I'm sorry to be here late. I feel bad.
No, it's okay. You'll just
meeting.
have to come back another time.
Yeah, I'll come in. We can next week. We'll put some coils in.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do a little bit of Baywatch and then a little bit of something else. I'm sure we could wrangle up a little bit of something else to muck with. I'd like to.
I'm sure Shadow. We can replace that translite. I'm sure Marco won't mind.
No, it doesn't. Who cares if he minds? We're gonna change it because it's awful. Any? I can't read.
Recommendations on upgrading the fishtail's flapping fish topper.
No, it's perfect. You don't need to upgrade it. It's perfect.
What kind of upgrade are you want? More thump?
Yeah.
Put a 22,550 in there instead of a 23,800.
Okay. There you go. You can make the thumpiest fishtail of all
It'll be
time.
really thumpy.
And I hate LED flashers,
It's
but you could
really
totally put an LED flasher behind the fish's eye to make it totally ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. Crane.
Yay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
C&K. Sure, ask. Kyle, will you be on Discord tonight? Yes.
What is your display ROM question?
I am playing video games and drinking whiskey tonight, so I will definitely be on Discord. What? Oh, okay. I think you need DSP-A for America. DSP-I Italian. DSP-L is Spanish. DSP-G is German. DSP-A is going to be your American American English display ROM. So that would be what you're looking for
Midge's
there.
here.
Oh, Steve's here.
Hey, Midge.
Yay.
Yeah.
Jump in.
Steve has a ponytail.
Look at that.
Yeah, good luck with that. Well, now
Man, you should have seen my entrance. It was epic. It was epic.
throwing microphones.
I did. I threw a microphone.
You dropped the mic before you started?
Well, it was still in the box, so
Meetings.
yeah. I threw it twice actually, just to make sure. The first time wasn't enough, so did it a second time.
Den says, I think that was the ZZ Top guy.
Nah.
Jeez.
That's better than Duck Dynasty.
Yeah, better than Duck Dynasty, guy.
Pinball 122 came in and there's just, what did he say? More windings equal stronger coil, question mark?
No.
No, it's the other way around, actually. Less windings, more power as a rule of thumb. It is not always that way. There's a point where it just stops working.
Yeah.
There's not enough magnetic effect to do the
You're
work.
starting with 0. Yeah.
If you're starting with 0, then yeah, it's
We were talking about that earlier, and I was like, I just don't think it's like.
You gotta explain Faraday's law to everybody.
oh yeah,
No.
good luck. And I don't have to for sure. That would be a very disappointing conversation.
I was just
Unless I
using-
can wing it. If I can just make that up as I go, we're
That's
we're
what I
super.
do.
I like the idea of a Faraday cage, but
Do you
be
want to
honest,
do a rivet tool mini pin tip video tomorrow?
No,
I do.
not
You
particularly.
want to do it?
I'll do it. It's not live, right? That's
No,
all my
it's not
anxiety was
live.
from being live, not from.
You're doing so
You just don't have to.
good.
That's why I brought you courage juice.
Yeah,
That's why we're
It's
doing
nice.
courage juice on camera
Right.
today, because it's
Yeah,
a little.
It's allowed.
No, y'all don't realize, like, every day before we did this damn show, like, I was like a nervous wreck before I got on camera because I was afraid of saying things wrong, and now I don't care. I say things are.
Well, you're humble enough to correct yourself, right? Like that's.
Well, I was too scared to make mistakes, and now
Yeah,
I
it's a
realize
different
that,
thing.
like, if I make a
Yeah.
mistake, like, people will just be like, I don't think that's right, and then you know what, because I'm not right all the time, so.
Oh yeah, I'm not shotgunning anything. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
old.
we don't
That's,
do that,
Not a
Colin.
thing I do anymore. I'm not sure I did it before either, honestly.
So would a large gauge wire give fewer windings in a larger magnetic field? I don't know if it's as simple as that. It's
It is not as simple as that, but you have, as far as pinball goes, that is a good rule of thumb. So if you need a slightly stronger coil, like you have a 23-800, you could try a 23-700 or a 23-650 or whatever's out there. But if you need like a noticeable bump, like a 22-550 or 22-500, that's going to be a noticeable change. You have one wire gauge larger and then also less turns. So that's one of the strongest coils in pinball is a
23-550?
22-550.
22.5.
Yep. Yeah,
We
it's
were
an
kind
older
of-
Williams coil. There are some United coils that are like 22-500 or 22. So I forget. We don't make them that much, but there are a few stronger ones. Not many. And then flipper coils. Actually, there are a bunch that are like way stronger as the primary on the winding. Like the Gottlieb coils have a couple hundred turns. It's like
Wow.
it's pretty amazing. Yeah, that they're.
We were
that
kind of
strong.
giving the I gave the dumb analogy of like we have to fit 10 waters through the tube,
Yeah.
right? And like in
Yeah.
a 23 gauge wire, well, we can fit those 10 waters 2 by 2.
Right.
So they only have to go 5 deep, where if we did a 31 gauge wire or something, we could only fit them in one at a time, and it would take
Yep.
them a lot longer, and that's
Yeah, it's
I
a
don't
good
know.
analogy.
I
for
tried.
Sure. No, that's good. That's a solid way to look at it for sure.
Colin, who can pound courage juice faster, Andrew or Kyle?
Kyle.
And I don't even think I could do it that fast. So, second the
There's
rivet
still
tool
jerky
video.
here? How is that possible? And also, why is it over there?
Because he felt bad. 'cause he left one pizza. I ate all the crumbs at the bottom.
That's the best part out of that container.
Rivet tools are hard to use. We can try it sometimes. We did some riveting on this show a long time ago when we were doing Indy 500 ramps. I want my rivet tool back that someone stole from me at
Do you have a rivet tool on you?
On me, yeah. All times I actually carry one.
big old C-jaw
I don't.
monster.
There's one at the
Well,
shop though.
tomorrow. We should do one tomorrow afternoon. Just a quick little.
There's one at the shop. We could use the one it's bench mounted.
Well, yeah, but
The
yeah,
lighting
that's
is
the
not
one
right
I'd
over
want to
there.
I
use.
can bring a light.
But I think some
We'll look
people
at
might
it.
want to use the like handheld ones, which are not always the greatest results. But there's riveting is not easy.
Do I have what?
A handheld one.
I have a bench mount one personally. I do not know what Marco has.
We do have some handheld ones we
Yeah.
sell, and one of them is actually quite good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We can
Make
try.
something work.
Easy squeeze?
It's actually called. Is that the part number? Easy Squeeze. I love it.
Steve could definitely pound courage juice faster than both of us. So yes, Steve will win that. But hold on, there's a better question other than Colin's
Oh wow!
question.
Just calling out the. Wow. Yes.
No, it's okay. Colin's friend of the show. He's the best.
He will also tell you how he feels. I'm sure.
Regarding tolerances, Andrew, so if your coil has specific resistance ratings, do you have a general tolerance above and below the printed resistance on the coil?
Yeah, when we QC, we generally try to use the OEM's original spec on that, unless we're being asked to do something different. And it's actually, it's kind of big. So depending on the era of coil, it's between 5 and 15%, which is a ridiculous.
So I'm assuming the way that we wrote
Change.
these labels are from manufacturer readings, I would assume, but we've got
It's probably like
3.8
optimal
ohms.
spec. Yeah.
And this thing, I know we checked a couple of them and they were not anywhere close to what the label said. We have 4.5, but that's what.
Well, you have resistance in here when you're getting low like that, and the meter could play into that as well.
That's what I was saying. I don't
meter.
trust this meter
Yeah.
either 100%. So either way, it's like I think the advice I would give is someone who is not a manufacturer and coils either work or they don't 98% of the time, as long as it's close.
Yes.
Right? If your coil says 3.8 ohms but you measure 4.4, it's fine. If your coil says 3.8 ohms and it measures 1.5, you're probably not so fine.
Yeah, that's a
So,
big leap.
I would.
But yes, it's 5 to 15% of the DCR, the resistance of the coil.
What's DCR?
So
DC
it's
resistance?
like a direct
direct.
measurement basically
Okay.
on there, instead of like some other mythological like magnetic measurement that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, something
which
the
is
Greeks
possible.
probably invented.
They did, I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
they had bagatelles in mind back then, though, not modern pinball.
19 gauge.
Yep, that's a stout coil. 18 is the biggest I found in pinball in the about 12 years of doing this. I think 18 gauge is the what was it for a gun game or something? You guys asked me for. It was a really big bobbin too, like that. One of those larger, this size.
Like a gun
But
game?
I think
like
it was a gun game
An EM
coil.
gun game or like a.
Yeah, an EM gun game, and it was like 18 gauge and 400 turns or something. Like the coil weighed a lot. Yeah, I don't.
would they
you,
do that?
You really want recoil on that gun. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Because you also want to try to like pull it apart because that feels like disassembly speed.
All right. Well, the internet is still pretty active, but I want to go home. So, who are we going to raid?
California burbs.
Dash ducks, man.
Let's see if
Marine mammal rescue is the other one. That's a great.
I like that one.
Well, the otters swimming around is pretty great.
Is Manu on? Manu is not.
Oh, hey, remind everyone to vote for the Twippies.
Oh yeah, vote in the Twippies. You should absolutely vote in the Twippies like soon because the voting has been live for some time, and if you want to vote for us, please do. I would appreciate it.
We have more visitors.
You don't have to, because there's other people that put more time and effort into streaming, and
Sell
they
yourself short, man.
I agree.
You got this.
they also deserve your votes. But I appreciate every single vote you would potentially cast my way, even though I don't want to win. Our way. I'm sorry. I don't want to win because I will be embarrassed to go on the stage, and I won't actually probably.
It's too late, Kyle. You're famous.
No, I think you should vote for Manu. Mystery Pinball Theater 3000 is amazing.
Thanks, Colin.
He does great work. Andy at Loose Flip is incredible, even though most of his streaming is in German. The production is fantastic. And then, I mean, Hub Challenge, those guys are fantastic. But, I mean, come on, Jack Danger just rules, always.
Do
He
we
deserves his
sell
votes.
the pinball screw to tighten the flipper bat for JJP?
We might sell them, but
Are you
honestly,
talking about this part?
just
Am I
replace the
in-
whole
I'm not
crank
in
and
frame
link. Just if you need something for one of you, if you need that screw for your JJP game, I would just replace the entire crank and link. If it's broken like that, then I would just replace the whole unit. You can, but come on, they're so cheap now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I understand rebuilding them piecemeal, but those things cost nothing. So.
And it's a Williams part too, so if you have
Yep.
bits
Yeah,
laying around.
and that's the other thing. Yeah, it's a Williams part. It's not a Jersey Jack specific thing, so you can use common parts that are around. So
if you are intent on just switching the screw out, feel free to put that in the Discord if you could. Do you mind linking that?
I know.
Amoto?
Just get on our website, type in 1032 cap screw.
Is it you actually know which one?
no.
Okay.
They're not. They're talking about the one that pinches the link together, not the.
Whatever.
Is it cap screw, right? It's got.
Is it cap screw? Hey, we're pulling it up to see.
It's the Pac-Man screw.
I'll say we can answer later, but we're just going to answer it now, so
Yeah.
never mind. Also, join our Discord.
Yeah, you should do that because we talk crap all day. Thanks for the stream. Great.
What was it called,
Oh,
Steve?
it's actually, I was wrong because I was thinking it's that Pac-Man screw.
Do you have the link?
I know what you're talking about, like the this bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
type in Williams flipper crank. I would just replace that thing. It's not worth it if you snap that. They're so cheap. Just replace the whole thing. Go down.
So these are you're telling them to replace this part.
Just replace the
Oh,
whole
the
thing.
whole
Oh, actually, there it is. Well, there it is, right there.
Yeah.
So the part number is go down a moto or with your mouse.
yeah.
Go left all the way. Okay, it's not sold, so we don't sell them separately. So get the whole thing. You'll be happy you did.
This one?
No, go down.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you need those. No, you don't. That's an early one. So go down again. So it's those ones. It's that one and that one. Yep.
So keep in mind when you're ordering this, there's a left and a right
Yep.
that you need to be aware of.
Thank
And
you.
I think, do you have a complete one? The trick was if you're holding it like this.
Yeah.
If it's facing this way, it's a right, and if it's facing that way, it's a
point the
left.
actuator away from you. If it's on the right, it's a right. On the left, that's the only way I can remember
Yeah.
it. But and
Mike
don't
Fox
early the early ones.
taught me that trick. I'd
really?
been 20 years in pinball at that point, and he's like, "Here's the easy way to tell," and I would just stare at it before. So that stuck. It was a good lesson.
It's a good one.
No wonder he works at a pinball company now.
Link to the Twippies emoto. Someone was asking about that. I think if you go to thisweekinpinball.com, it's not hard to find.
It's cookies background.
Twippies, well, hey, just link it. This
And-
is how you can vote for the Twippies.
And no problem on that linkage. If you need the left one, change the R to an L, and you're good to go.
Perfect. Thank you, Wildman9999. Thanks for joining us, as always.
Yeah, thank you.
Orbiter Guitars, thank you for rating us. Thank you for joining as well, mate.
Oh, we got a raid right at the end, oh no.
No, he rated us way earlier.
Oh, well, thanks for your
Hey, it's our friend of the show, Obi Drunk Kenobi, here at the last second. Hold on, I gotta read this last one.
And Nintendo Baby.
Everyone's here. Well, we're leaving, so we can't entertain these people. Sorry. No, just kidding.
We're totally entertaining, I swear.
Thank you for subscribing to us.
Yeah, thank you. 23 months, whoa,
Right?
long time.
Long-time subscriber, just like you.
It's unreal that it's been 2 years, right? Like,
I know, it's kind of
time
insane.
flies.
Wait, what's Games Done Quick doing? It's kind of
Time
insane.
flies.
It's kind of
Time
insane.
flies. One with a water damage cabin. Police force.
No, we're
Discover
gonna raid
playfield.
Dax
Maryland.
plays. He's playing a Tales of the Raining Night. Or Borg Dog is on.
Oh, we should raid Board Dog. Board Dog was here just a minute ago.
Nice.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Um,
Appreciate the future business. It sounds like you'll have some fun work to do on
Yeah.
those machines.
a lot of work.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Fascinating insights into coils. Didn't you
You're
say
welcome.
everyone was just going to fall asleep?
I mean, yeah, basically.
Someone found it fascinating and
I'm glad.
insightful.
I'm glad.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
good. Yeah, thanks for
I mean,
having
I
me
thought
on.
it was pretty fascinating and insightful.
Thanks for having me on.
Everything is magical inside of a pinball
It
machine.
really is. Kinetic art, man.
So next week you're gonna install the coil?
I don't know. Next week we're gonna make Marco's shadow not a piece of crap. So we'll do some good
What?
stuff to it.
It played okay mostly yesterday.
Look at it.
I don't.
It's awful.
Yeah.
You change the translate?
Yes.
He hates the translate so much. He has,
That's all he's been talking about.
he has some weird ranger with that translate. I do not understand.
It's terrible.
It's really bad.
I don't know
it's
if you guys
really
know
bad.
this, but the translate in shadow is something Kyle does not like.
Oh, we talked about it for like 30 minutes.
I know.
last week.
I know.
It's so awful.
We
No,
talked
it's-
about RX version too, right? He had made a
Yeah.
version of it too.
That one was
I've
pretty
seen.
neat.
It's
Yeah.
not bad. It's fine. That one's fine.
Yeah,
That
my
one's
brother has
pretty-
that one in his game. I enjoy
Oh,
it.
okay, bye.
Bye. We're rating.